2020, and it's around 7:35, and I'm here with Sean Oliver. My name is Celeste Henry, and it's my understanding, Sean, that you were released in April of 2020. Is that correct?
That's right.
Excellent.
That's right.
And as we all are aware, that was right in the middle of this coronavirus. And so I wanted to begin by asking you when you first heard of this coronavirus.
Well, we were made aware of it at the unit that I was at because they were taking safety precautions, such as basically they had stopped all movement. And then they went from stopping all movement to basically just feeding us 12 at a time in a chow hall, which basically took the better part of the whole day. Because if you're feeding 12 at a time and we were spaced out, then that's going to interrupt unit operations. And the reason that was crucial, the last unit I was on was the Carol Vance unit in Sugar Land, Texas. And I was there in a Christian program that basically it helps you and prepares you to re-enter society. And so classes were suspended, schedules were stopped, but it was for health reasons, but yet the same things were stopped. And so then I knew that it was not only serious, but I was made aware of different precautions.
Gotcha. And was this in March or in April? Do you recall, in the early part of the month? Or
it began in March.
Okay.
It began in March, and it had proceeded through my release.
Okay. And was there conversation about what this was that was coming in? Was there conversation amongst inmates around that you recall?
There was basic conversation between myself and my peers that really we were pondering the fact that the only way we could get it is if someone from the outside came. And at the time I worked in the chaplaincy. And so I personally was really praying that nothing happened, because there was a series of events that were scheduled that month that were critical for a lot of men as far as their spiritual development. And those programs were canceled. Visitation was canceled. The phone calls and everything for about a 2 to 3 week time, they were basically stopped. And that causes a lot of consternation on behalf of my peers. And so as far as finding out different details, at the time I was getting the USA Today, and I was watching USA Today because the dorm I'm on, we don't have TVs on those dorms. The TVs are in the day room. And so I would read the USA Today, and what I found, one of the interesting articles, it was telling you how to make a homemade mask. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. You've got in the newspaper article to make a homemade mask.
Gotcha. And can you talk a little bit about between when you first heard of the outbreak and up to when you were released? Could you share a little bit about that experience as more information was known?
Basically, I just reassured my relatives that the unit I was on, they were doing the best that they could because they were worried about me. But at the same time, you can only do so much. And then right before I left, someone at J1, and once again, just people talking, had contracted it. And then more than one person had contracted it. And these units are not that far apart from one another. And then there was a great concern. Man, what if it comes in here? And it did not while I was there, but within 2 weeks after my leaving, it not only came on that unit, there were a lot of people who contracted it. And one of the main things that I did, I prayed, but we were concerned, like we can only defend so much. We live in such close proximity. And by us being incarcerated, security is going to be there. Security has to be there. So there was a great concern. There was a great concern about relatives beyond prison. And some people's relatives had contracted it, not that many, but the fact that some were older. And recently, some of the men that I've known that have gotten out, been released, just passed because of COVID. So we not only thought that it was serious, we're very concerned about the fact that even if TDCJ did all that they could, there's only so much defense against that. And so for me and the gentleman that I associated with, we prayed and not only against the virus, but you've got to understand people's families not being allowed to see them. Volunteers who give spiritual counseling not being allowed to come in. Yes, it was because of safety, but that created a very uptight feeling for the whole unit. Everything was not normal, shall we say.
And you mentioned that you work within a Christian program, and I'm assuming doing some kind of ministry. Did you wind up assisting from that kind of purview during the midst of all of
Yes, definitely, because right before I left, when you bring that up, they allowed us, like, right at the beginning to have church service. And literally, we had to set up the chapel with the chairs 6 feet apart. Well, and they only allowed us, I'm guesstimating it was 45 to 60 men in there. So literally, we had worship services where we were 6 feet apart. And the director at the time, Daryl Brooks, and a pastor at the time who's also a counselor there, Darren Frank, they came in to do services, and it was just it was good service. We love the fact we had service, but we were so spread out, and it's like, hey, you're way over there, and hey, I'm way over there. And there was a little bit of confusion, and it wasn't on the behalf of the chaplaincy, but with security, because you want to give everyone an opportunity for a worship service, but then at the same time, with all the other measures and responsibilities, it was a little shaky. It was a little shaky, and there was some attitudes, and sometimes some different men were not able to make it, but we got to do that until the pandemic worsened, and it's just like, no, there's nothing. And the reason that's crucial, without faith-based programming, my personal experience after 27 years of incarceration, when you stop that or interfere with that, you're going to interfere with the unit operations, because men who are not necessarily receiving the counseling or the love or just being able to talk with the people who they trust the most, those men could do anything. And I don't say that haphazardly. I know that a lot of different things have been stopped on a unit as far as violence because of church services, because of the counselors and everything else. And so that was a very serious thing, because when a man has his mind that I want to go to worship service, or, hey, I'm going to see Pastor so-and-so, and he doesn't, there's not only disappointment, that can create a attitude that is not easy to deal with, not only for his peers, which would be my fellow offenders, but for the staff.
And what was the mood, kind of? How did it change?
There were, when I say attitude, when men are not allowed to see their families, and until
Wait, Sean?
Yes.
Oh, there. It went mute for a second. So if you could just back up to the beginning of your answer, that would be wonderful.
Can you re-ask your question?
Just asking more about the mood and kind of.
Okay. The mood of the unit was very uptight, not only because of the fact that feeding took all day. So literally what that looked like is, where we would normally start chow at 9:20 and finish by 11:30. You're looking at a meal taking from 9 in the morning till maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, and then you turn right back around and you do it again. There's no movement. There's no recreation at first. And then when they began to run recreation, because of the size of the unit, some people would be allowed to go to rec, some people would be allowed to go to the day room. The unit was just not equipped to handle social distancing. And then you put on the fact that the officers are scared. The offenders are not being allowed to speak to their relatives. Offenders are not being allowed to speak to their girlfriends or wives or children. And everybody, in the back of our minds, we know that this is a hard situation to deal with. It still created for a lot of angst between the staff and the offenders. And when I say that, nothing occurred, but attitudes and patience levels were really, really stretched. And even to the standpoint to where the men, they would walk around the unit and they would spray bleach and various other things. And it's like, I mean, it just breaks up what's considered normal. And the best way I know how to put it, there were no violent incidents, but I can tell you that psychologically and emotionally, a lot of people, I don't want to say suffered, but did not deal with it well. That's the best way I know how to put it.
Gotcha. And had you experienced, was there anything comparable in your time to this pandemic and the experience?
Was there anything I would compare it to?
Yeah.
The closest thing I could compare it to is one time a few years ago, I believe it was called H1N1, when I was on the Polunsky unit. That occurred, and I happened to be working a job where I would go around the unit and I would spray bleach. And when you don't know that you can get sick from something, and you know that your best defense still might not be enough, meaning washing your hands and staying away from someone. To some, that's very worrisome, especially to the age population. And that's the closest thing I could compare it to. But honestly, I've never seen movement restricted to the point that it was. And definitely when it comes to church programming or spiritual programming, I've never seen it where it was that rigid. 45, 60. You come in for an hour, you have to leave at this time, because they're trying to make sure that everybody has access. But I want to let you know, there was no consistent timing. And so literally, when I get up, if I want to go to church, I literally don't know when. So you could spend your whole day waiting and hoping, and you still have the possibility that you might not be able to make it because shifts change. Staff may not communicate well with one another. And we thought you guys had an opportunity, but you didn't. And just in all honesty, for me personally, I prayed and I read. And at the time, I had found out in February that I would be going home. And so I was just basically personally trying to leave better than I came. And when I say that, I do my best to keep a good attitude to try to help people because I'm passionate about that. It's not that someone makes me. It's not that I feel compelled to prove something, but I like to help people. And so when people are not in a good space, I feel it is my responsibility to try to do my part. If I don't have a part or you don't allow me to play a part, that's not going to preclude me from making an attempt. And so I made an attempt. But I also understood. I don't have a wife. I don't have children. But I understood. And some of these guys, that's like their lifeline. That's like their lifeline. And even when TDC came back and they gave free phone calls. So I had a little ammo to try to talk to some of the guys. But here we go. How many people do you think are going to try to use a phone for a 15-minute free phone call? Everybody. So now that creates a line which prison can be disrespectful. And in all honesty, how do you create a line of 15-minute free phone calls? And even though they extended rack time, you're still not going to get all that time because along with the free phone calls, you still have other phone calls. And the way that the system was set up, I even had a situation with it, meaning you could not call. Let's say I had to call my aunt in preparation for parole. When I try to call my aunt because I need a longer phone call to get my affairs in order, I have to use up the 15-minute phone call. Meaning when I dial, it's going to dial for a 15-minute free phone call and then hang up. Well, now I needed more than 15 minutes and I didn't want to use the 15 minutes because I need 30 minutes. But now I've used the 15 minutes. Now I'm in a line. When do you think I'm going to get back on the phone? And I'm gonna be honest with you, I prayed a lot, and I had favor with some gentlemen, and I got to make my phone calls, but I legitimately needed to make these calls in preparation of my release. But the reason I wasn't frustrated, what more can they do? I don't know. But I know that people have jobs and they get paid to figure that out. And I don't mean that with an attitude. I'm not going to try to figure it out. I'm just going to do the best that I can, which is, excuse me, gentlemen, I really need to do this. And they allowed me to. And so I was thankful for that. But that's a very bad situation. And I don't have an answer, and it's not an accusation. It's just the fact that there are situations that COVID created behind walls that I don't have answers to. And so I know there's a possibility that people making decisions, they can make the wrong decisions. They can make the best decisions with the information they have, and it still not be a good decision. So I have understanding about that, but you still have to deal with the effects. And there are hard effects because of COVID right now going on in prison.
Mm-hmm. Are you still in contact with people that are incarcerated?
Yes, I am. And as a matter of fact, the unit that I spent basically a year and some months on Carol Van's unit, but the Polunsky unit that I spent 20 plus years on it, they went from basically like 27 cases of COVID to hundreds. That's documented. Whoever wants to check it. It went from 27 to hundreds. Not 100, not 200, a little more. And those guys, because I write them, that was bad. And when I say bad, I don't know anyone that I was in contact with that passed from COVID. Mm-hmm. But there were men, I'm not going to say a lot, that passed. And people need comfort, and people need to understand that, hey, man, I could die from this. And that created some conversations, communications, through the mail, that there are people genuinely worried. And if I can digress, one of the biggest deals on the Carol Vance unit, a lot of my peers, they were really pushing their relatives, and their relatives are really asking if you've already made parole, meaning a lot of the men at Carol Vance unit, they have FI-18s. That means they are subject to release upon completion of the faith-based program. Well, if the faith-based program is put on hold, what does that do to those men? And so what they were praying and hoping, and their families were, since you already have parole, we're not talking about people who hope for parole, they already have made parole, but it's a matter of completing the program. They were really hoping that someone on a state level would say, well, if you made parole and because of COVID, we cannot run the programming, then why can't they just let us out? I wasn't in that situation, but I could understand that their families were like, they made parole. And I understand the state. Okay, they made parole with the restriction of this. Okay, but the restriction, we cannot meet the qualifications for an indefinite time period. That created a lot of attitudes. Mm-hmm. Because, when things are going bad and you want some hope, anytime somebody comes up with an idea or a plan that you seem to think is feasible and it doesn't happen, what does that do to the average person? Yes.
You're asking me?
No, I'm waiting on the next.
Okay, no, you're leaving it up in the air. What does it do? We can fill in the blank on that one.
Okay.
It demoralizes people.
Okay. Okay. Well, the details of that would be you had a lot of people's hope demoralized.
Right.
And even after I left, something that occurred, because they did have cases. Once I left, there were cases. And what that did to some men who had a set date to leave, meaning their sentence was not completed, but they made parole. They would finish their sentence upon release. They were held because when COVID, like say I stay on 7 dorm. Well, when 7 dorm, 2 or 3 people catch COVID on Friday night, and I'm supposed to leave Monday, there's no leaving. Mm. Now, what they did come up with, because different men who've gotten out, we communicate, was they sent some of the men to another unit who had made parole, who they knew your date is upcoming. But there were some people that, no, it got pushed back. And then a great concern on my end, and I'm gonna be honest with you, after doing that much time, I was happy I made parole. But people would ask me, they say, you know that if the parole office closes, you could be here. And I was like, I'm glad I made parole. But then it did cross my mind, like, oh my goodness, I could be delayed. And I ended up being delayed, but it wasn't because of COVID, but I know men who were delayed because of COVID. And so that's just a lot to deal with. And there's already a lot to deal with behind bars. And so this pandemic, it really, people are dealing with things that they've never dealt with. And I thank God that a lot of them are dealing with it well. But because I know from doing a lot of time, I know there's a lot of people who aren't doing well with it. What that looks like, I can't begin to tell you because I don't have a personal experience, but I have a personal experience with men who experience far less. And I can just tell you, when you begin to interfere with visits and phone calls and food, I can tell you that that is a very bad situation.
Can we go back? You mentioned that is it that you made parole in February, or that you found out that you're?
I found out that I made parole, and I had what was called an FI2. So what that means, at the end of February, my month was March, meaning I should be released sometime in March. I ended up being released in April. That does happen. That does happen. But throughout that month, I'm just waiting to go and just praying and hoping no one brings COVID in. And so for me, it didn't happen because, like I said, 2 weeks after I left, there was some problems, you know.
But it did cross your mind that parole, that you might be released, it might be delayed because of COVID.
Oh, it definitely crossed my mind, because I'm realizing as I'm reading my newspapers, because once again, I wasn't watching the TV and I'm speaking to my family, that it's a very serious situation. And then as it began per se to spread, just from my knowledge, I didn't know everything. I don't have CNN, but when it broke out per se, or was discovered in America, I really took note, but I really did not experience the effects of COVID on a personal level until I was released. I experienced it slightly from an inconvenience standpoint, but obviously, if I had children or a wife, I'm telling you, obviously, that would be a great concern that I have no definitive date when I'm going to talk to them. And they still don't have visits. And that means a lot for family members to have physical visits. A lot of people don't understand, but a lot of people, they get resolved from those visits. They get the physical contact from those visits. They get the understanding from their wives where they can be face to face. They get to, for a few hours, step outside of a place with a lot of attitudes, filled with a lot of distrust and just the aggression, and going to visit. It's like, hey, my kids are there, my wife is there. And so that took a bunch of prayer and just encouraging people that everything has a season. And the only thing that I can let you know is a season passes. I don't know when this season is going to pass, but don't do anything in this season negatively that will affect your next season.
And Sean, would you be willing to share about the experience of finding out that you would be released and what that was like?
Yes, I will. I had an interview with one of the parole individuals. And the reason that's important, you don't always see the people who are voting for you. And so my prayer and other men's prayers are, let me see someone, one of the 3 voters who's actually voting on me so that they can not just look at the paper, but they can see me. And so the lady came and she saw me and she said, listen, here's what I want to know. I don't want to know what you've done while you've been incarcerated. I'm not going to speak to you right now about the crime. We'll get there. What I want to know is, who were you? Who are you now? And why should we release you? And for me personally, that's all I ever wanted, because my prayer has always been, I pray that you see me as I am. I don't have to put on a facade. I don't have to clean up. See me as I am. And I believe that a one-on-one interview, whatever was conveyed, because I prayed and I said, whatever you want them to see, let them see that. And so I let her know. And she asked me the final question. She was like, is there anything that you would like for your voters to know before we vote on you? And I said, yes, ma'am. I said that I would really appreciate an opportunity. Again, I realize that it's a privilege. And I said, if you give me an opportunity and release me, I would make a difference. I would not only make a difference where I live, I would make a difference for the men who are incarcerated, and I would make a difference in this world. And I firmly believe that. And that's what I've been passionate about and continue to do, because that's what's in my heart. Where my heart was full of other things that led me to incarceration, God changed my heart. And when he changed my heart, I like to help people be the best that they can be. And so when I found out, the way that I found out that I made parole was I had left one of my classes. And when I left my class, the officer let me know. She was like, you need to go to the infirmary. And I said, okay. So when I went to the infirmary, I waited. And so the lady was like, do you know why you're here? And I said, no, ma'am. My officer told me to report to the infirmary. And she said, well, this is for, she didn't say pre-release. I cannot remember her exact words, but she basically said, this is for release. And I said, well, I thought that's what this unit was for. Are you telling me that I'm going to be shipped to another unit? She says, you don't understand. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm just asking you a question. I'm not trying to offend you. I'm just asking a question. And she goes, you made parole. And so when she told me, I said, thank you. And they take blood and they do an HIV test. And so I went back to my bunk, and there were a lot of guys who, I got blessed to help a lot of guys. And so the youngsters, some wild guys, when I say wild, they wild and all that. They were like, Rev, you let us know when you make parole, you let us know. And I said, man, you know what, I'm going to let you guys know. They weren't the church goers. They weren't the brothers who I'm praying with all the time. They were guys who would visit me, and I would listen to them, and I would talk to them. And, so I went back and I was like, now don't tell everybody, because here's the deal. I would be bombarded. With, hey, how did you make parole? And so when I told them, I sat down and I was happy. And then I called my family. And I'm just really appreciative, because I was guilty. I was guilty of the crime that I committed. But I knew that I wasn't the same person. But I wanted an opportunity. I had done all that I could do behind bars. Wherever I've been, I've done my best to help that place be better when I leave. And God, it's not me. I'm nothing special. But he blessed me. And he blessed me because I had a willingness. And that has been one of the greatest things that has occurred in my life. People ask me, like, when you were released, what happened first? And where I would think, like, from the movies, I'd be like, oh, the air or the food. It wasn't. A friend of mine who had done 27 years, he was out there. My best friend's wife was out there. A lady who had done ministry, she was out there. And my friend, he was out there. And what happened, they had FaceTime Live going. And I didn't know. And so I'm out there, how you doing? This, that, nothing. I'm happy to be here. And I'm encouraged by just friends being out there. And so a phone number was exchanged and it picked up on the video. So different people who knew me that were watching the video, they thought that was my phone. It wasn't my phone, it was my friend's phone. So when we're on our way, he's getting bombarded by phone calls and he's busy. He's getting, before he say, here's the phone. And the whole time till around 8 o'clock that night, my heart was not focused on, I'm free. It was overwhelmed with the fact that relationships that I gained throughout incarceration, people were genuinely happy for my release. And the overwhelming feeling that I had was just like, man, relationships are great. I never served people to become my best friend. I never did what I did as God led me to do it because I thought we'd be friends. I did it because, okay, God is putting that on me. But what came out of it, people genuinely loved me. People genuinely were happy, and I felt that. And that was the best experience that just held me to about 8 o'clock. And if I might say, the first meal I had, because I have a GPS device, and it kept saying, go out to get a satellite signal. So I ended up having to sit outside, and the family who I stay with, they have a little 4-year-old. So he and I ended up just sitting out there until the device picked up. And so when we went inside, he said, I want to cook you lunch. Now remember, I've done 27 years. And that's things that people talk about, like, hey, you want to eat. What you going to eat? I didn't have a preference. I know I'm not just going to eat some nonsense, but I was just like, man, that's really not a priority, but I will eat something good. My first meal after 27 years that the little 4-year-old cooked for me was hot dogs and Cheetos. And I ate those hot dogs and Cheetos, and I was happy.
One thing I wanted to ask, Sean, and this is, was if you could speak to what is it like going back to the encounter with the woman from the parole review board who you spoke with. If there's a way to describe what it's like to have to plead your case, if you will, to a person, and that's one influential person who has a lot of power and control of your life, and what does it feel like to go into that space and to make your case for yourself?
For me, because I had faced a voter before, and I pray before I go in, and I don't pray, God, give me the words to say. I don't go in with a plan. I like the plan. But my opinion, my personal opinion, is that there are so many people who want to get out of prison that any plan, even if it was a real plan, that's really not what they're concerned with. I believe that they're concerned with the safety of people outside of prison. I understand that. And the way I felt about this interview, I just want to tell you who I am. And I'm trusting that your professionalism, your discernment, it'll carry you where you need to go. But I would also add this. My experience, not on this last time, but my experience, my personal opinion, is that at times you're asking people who may not necessarily be equipped from an experiential place to judge whether or not I'm going to commit another crime. And one discussion that I often have with different volunteers and different people, and I said this, I was convicted by a jury. I was guilty. I don't have a problem. My peers, I don't have a problem. But I said the problem is this. I'm telling you that there are people who commit crimes, heinous crimes, that if you committed crime, you would be able to understand they're not going to do that anymore. But if you've never committed that crime, how can you have the insight to understand that's really not who that individual is? And if I could take 2 minutes, if I had it, I could explain the scenario.
Please do.
Take a young man who's in high school. He wants to go to prom. He has friends that go to school. He has other friends that don't go to school that are gang members. He stays in the neighborhood. He does not have enough money for prom. The people he goes to school with, they come basically from a household that has 2 parents and they don't have a problem with prom. He doesn't. He lives with his mother. So he's like, I don't have any money. These guys and girls that go to school with him, they're laughing at him. The gang member says, well, you can go get it. He's like, well, man, how do I go get it? Here's a gun. Just do a home invasion. Man, I really don't know. Look, man, just take the gun, and if somebody sees you, they'll be scared and they'll give you the money. So say he goes in the house. He does the home invasion. When he's trying to leave, dad comes downstairs. He's scared. Dad grabs it. He shoots the dad. Wife comes downstairs. She grabs it. She's screaming. Kid comes downstairs. He hits the wife because he's trying to get away. Boom. Bottom line, we're in court. You committed murder. You assaulted a woman. And you expect me to believe that you can be a good citizen. But to a person who's committed crime, bro, that's not him. He did that, but I know you can't understand that, so there's no need of me to explain it. There are a lot of people who are incarcerated who committed violent acts. They're really not violent. They're violent and they committed the act, but they're not violent and that's not their propensity. And so when you're asking a parole officer to judge by a piece of paper, you went in the house. It's not your house. You had a weapon. It was an illegal weapon. You shot a man in his house. You hit his wife. Come on, brother. But in the context of my scenario, he can't possibly see who this man is. And so there is great pressure when you go before a parole officer. Because in all honesty, this is just me talking. She saw me. Since I've been out, I've done exactly what I'm going to do. But the recidivism rate says that the majority of us, we don't. And so there is no perfect system, but I just emphasize the fact that what we have in place is not working because of the recidivism rate. Do I have an answer for it? No, I don't, other than we need what I've seen work. What I've seen work. When you invest in changing a mind and a heart, because if you just change the mind, that's just modified behavior. But if the heart changes, then that's transformation. And when you involve yourself in transformation, then I'm telling you the criminal element goes out the window. But once again, in a 5 to 10 minute interview, how can a person understand that? They have to go by face value.
And can you share a little bit about once you shared that day and finding out that you were going to be released, can you talk about some of the arrangements that you had to make? You mentioned speaking to an aunt, I believe, and what's that process like?
Okay. The arrangements that I had to make, when you make parole, someone is going to come and they're going to give you a paper saying you made parole. So when I received my paper, one of the first things we asked, are we going to have monitors on us? Because a lot of people, they're not told they're going to have monitors, but upon release, they get monitors. And so the lady said, oh, no, you're not going to have a monitor. I said, how do you know I'm not going to? She says, everybody asked me that. And so I would have it right here. The day that I made parole, the men with me, they went before me because the parole, the local parole representative interviewed him. And so when she interviewed me, I looked to the right on the floor. There's a device. And I said, is that for me? And she was like, yes. I said, my stipulations don't say that. She says, it's for you. The arrangements that I had to make, the home where I'm at, they had to put in a landline. They had to have a device placed in their home where my GPS device charges. They had to make a lot of arrangements. I can go into more detail about what that looked like because of COVID, but just the fact that they had to have devices placed in their home that weren't in their home just so that I could be in their home. They had to come into whatever compliance parole said. So you have a family who has children, who's living a normal life, that have to make changes because I'm coming. And so, especially with the device. And so what that looked like, I had some definite problems with the fact that when I left, you want to get a license. They give you an ID. But a lot of things that you're asked about, they're like, hey, we want your license. Well, the driver's license offices were closed. So I called all over to just check because different sources would say, oh, this driver's license place. I called all the numbers and finally I told the individual I'm living with, here are all the numbers that I called. None of the driver's license offices are open and it says per the governor. So what that did, I have to be at the parole office. So you have a businessman who has a family to support, who has to drive me to the office at the time listed by my parole officer, wait outside because COVID precludes you from coming in there with him. There is no definitive time when we will see him. So he may be here until whenever, and you have to wait because immediately following his departure, he has to get back, meaning we will give you a certain time to get here. We will give you a certain time to leave. That's hard. That's not only hard on the family, that's hard because his life is stopped for me. That went on for weeks. There's nothing I can do as far as me getting a job. I could not go out and try to find a job because I was told you need to get a job interview confirmed. Once you get the confirmation, you call us, let us know. We will call the job, make sure that they have definitively said you're going to get an interview, and then we will get back in touch with you. Do you know how hard it is to get a job interview in the midst of COVID? And then I have to say, oh, well, I can't come until my parole officer calls you. That was super difficult, but praise God, I had grace and I had favor. So for me, I kept calling. And my first interview was at a hardware store, got permission, things were looking good. I did the interview, let's say, on a Wednesday. When I did the interview on a Wednesday, she called me back Friday when we were at the grocery store, and she said, I need you to come in Monday. I said, ma'am, I can't come in Monday because my schedule is made weekly. I have to call and get permission, and then once the week rolls around. And she was like, okay, I understand. Get the permission, go through all that, show up. And the reason why this is hard, this is the only job. Because COVID is precluding me from being able to get to other jobs. And so when I go, she's like, you sound great. I want to hire you. Oh, by the way, I just have to ask these two questions. I'm a new manager. Do you have any theft or violence in your history? Yes, ma'am. She said, what? She said, you're such a nice man. I said, well, I do. And is that going to preclude me being hired? She said, yes, it is. And so now, because of COVID, what am I to do? But praise God, got another job interview at the Dollar Tree. Make a long story short, Dollar Tree hired me. But it was a process. It was a process of calling, confirming the interview. And all of this is because of COVID. Oh, throughout this whole process, someone has to drive me everywhere I go. And when you're driving on a GPS, if I say I'm going from here to the Dollar Tree, you can't deviate to the gas station. And the obvious question, because I had to keep telling my friend, I said, no, they're serious. And he was like, well, what if I have to pull over? I said, you can't pull over. And so with COVID and the masks and the social distancing, everywhere he's taking me, he has to not only wait, but he has to stay back away from me. And so communication is so difficult. But then finally, and I'm skipping some weeks, my friend's wife was like, they say that the driver's license office is going to be open, that you have to call and make an appointment. Now, this is what gets interesting. We call and make the appointment, but the appointment is only because of COVID, only for you to come drive. 27 years, 10 months, 16 days for me to get a license. I've got to get behind a vehicle and pass a driver's license test. And if I don't do it, I can't get my license. Oh, and these interviews are not like daily. They're like, here's this time, and we don't know what the governor's going to do. I pray. We get there. I passed the driver's license test. Thank God. But for weeks, because of COVID, I had to be driven around. I had to inconvenience my friends. They're my friends. They did it. But basically what should have only taken a week to 2 weeks basically took me like 2 months. I'm thankful for the opportunity, but that COVID situation, it is detrimental to a lot of people who are being released because we have stipulations, we have fees, we have responsibilities that because of COVID restrictions, it is not impossible, but it is very, very difficult. And you not only have to have a made up mind, you have to get help. And if you don't have help, I'm telling you from experience, if I did not have help, what would you do? I'm not even going to consider it because I'm definitely not telling you that I commit crime. But what I'm telling you, because of COVID, without help, the difficulties might be impossible for some. My friend would constantly tell me, he said, what do people do who are in halfway houses or transitional houses who don't have help? How do they go get groceries? Because the stores are affected by COVID. So even if the store had what you needed, you can't go to the store right then because of maybe a stipulation. And so it's been very difficult. But I personally, I thank God. I thank God for the difficulties. But I'm being honest. That's why I've been in prayer that God just have mercy. I'm not pointing out, I don't believe in pointing out a problem without giving a solution. But in all honesty, this COVID situation, it is beyond my capacity to come up with an answer for every difficulty. I'm merely saying the difficulties that I face, that I got help overcoming. If I did not have the help, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And were you given any kind of information before your release is it staged, or do they give you information as you go, or is a lot of just sorting out and figuring it out?
I was given information on possible jobs in the area, in the zip code that I would be paroling to. But that information was not effective in practice when I pursued it. But the re-entry lady at the parole office that I go to, oh, by the way, they suspended going to the parole office. So that has put more pressure on the parole officers to come out and visit because the office is closed. The office is not closed. The office is limited as far as staff and movement. But even with her help, and I'm saying Miss Gage did her best. Because of COVID, I was not able to make different interviews And so simply put, if I didn't have the tenacity on my own to put forth effort as far as looking on a computer and making phone calls, the information I was given, I'm saying, was not sufficient. Not sufficient as far as me actually being able to execute it. And that was all affected by COVID.
And Sean, can you talk about going back to the first days of release? Thank you for sharing the story about your little friend and him preparing
to
heal. What's his name?
Luke.
Luke. Okay, lovely Luke. And can you share, though, I think sometimes people think of it as both could be a happy event, and as you said, it was an overwhelming experience. Once I think perhaps the adrenaline wore off, what was your first night like and the first couple of days like?
The aspect that I would say affected me immediately, my sleep did not become normal again for about 2 weeks. And when I say that, I averaged probably going to bed at 1, 2, 3, meaning it varied those first 2 weeks. But I was used to getting up at 5:30 because we do devotionals and things on that unit, and you get up at 5:30. So I never slept past 6 a.m. But if I didn't get any sleep until 1, 2, or 3 in the morning, that lets you know that I got tired. But I understood it. But I would say for me, my sleep pattern was greatly affected. Other things, that 3 weeks for me, because I'm always going to try to find, what can I do? I see what I can't do. Since I can't leave the home right now because the device precludes me from leaving until I have somewhere to definitely go, I learned how to use my phone. I acclimated myself with a laptop. And the most difficult aspect, and it's embarrassing to say it, but one of the most frustrating things was not learning about the computer or the phone, but filling out a job application. I quickly found out that when you type it in and you fill it out on the computer, if you miss something, then when you try to continue, it's going to shoot you back up. I'm literally telling you, the job applications that I was filling out, even though I thought I was being patient, there would constantly be something that I was missing. And so I just asked my friend's wife, I just said, I need help with this because I'm missing things. And when I think that I have gotten it right, it still won't continue. And I've still found that to be true. It's like recently I just did the ministry that I'm involved in. He said, hey, why don't you come up with 5 things that basically you could tell families that would help them help their relatives who have been incarcerated. And that was one of them. I said, be patient when it comes time to fill out applications on a computer. I said, be patient and don't be judgmental, because what's simple for you, for whatever reason, it can seem quite difficult and frustrating. And so that was an experience for me. Other than that, a lot of different things that I heard would maybe be difficult. They haven't been. And one, I attribute that not only to God, I attribute that to, I have a lot of different people around me to help me, but that makes me really pray, because I know that there are quite a few gentlemen that I'm in communication with, they don't. Mm-hmm. And you know, what can be a headache for me could be a life-changing experience for somebody else. And one of the other difficulties, the banks were closed. How do I get a bank account? And so I found how to get a bank account online with some help. How would I do that without some help? And I thank God that bank, you know, they conducted their business online, because these are things that were necessary. I need a bank account. I need to begin to build credit. I need my driver's license. But also what I needed was continual interaction with people, because just me, what I personally believe, when you come from being incarcerated, a lot of time you like seclusion because you're always surrounded by people. So you want to get by yourself. You want to sit by yourself. But I made a concerted effort that I need to involve myself in conversations so that I can reacclimate myself with conversations, have easy conversations about information. But as far as just sitting up and being in a social setting and having something to say, that just wasn't my preference. But I realized by that not being my preference, that could become a detriment. And so I initiated different, conversations. But once again, COVID, that precludes you from having contact with people, that precludes you from going to different places. And that's not good. That is not good for a person who has been incarcerated to remain standoffish or alone. And COVID is definitely placing people in seclusion and being very standoffish.
And you mentioned you're in contact with others. Is it fair to assume that those are other people who were released as well?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the unit I left, basically every 4 months, they would have what's called a group that leaves. A group consists of 40 people. And so I not only, the people who I did a lot of time with on the Polunsky unit, I talked to people who they've been out up to 15 years. So I have those people, but I have another set of people who they've been getting released since I've been released. And they're still getting released. My group, their time was up in April. What's this month? August. And some of them are just not getting released because of COVID.
And would you be willing to share some of kind of the themes or what people share about their release and about coming into this world with COVID?
Well, one thing initially, I've really had to encourage guys not to be frustrated with not being able to go find a job as easily as before COVID. Because a lot of people, when you come from incarceration, you need to work, you need to begin to get some money in the bank and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of disappointment with, okay, I just finished doing an extended period of time behind bars. I come out and my home or my apartment or my transitional house or my halfway house, it feels just like prison. I can't go where I want to go. And then you've got everyone in mass and people who have never been incarcerated at the beginning. That's pretty strange, everyone with a mask on. Walking into a bank and a grocery store and everybody's got masks on. That's sort of strange. So imagine the person who's been incarcerated and everywhere you go, there's a mask. People are muffled when they speak. People don't want to speak. You have questions. You need assistance. You need help. People are not willing to give it to you as easily as they might if there was no COVID. And things, your basic needs, grocery store, banking, driver's license, those things are not as accessible. And so that's why my encouragement generally is, if I asked you when we were incarcerated, would you rather be incarcerated or would you rather face whatever you need to face? You would say, well, I want to face it. Well, this is your opportunity. Because I'm really big on that. I'm not just going to look at the bad. I'm going to look at, okay, I'm going to play the whole tape. This is what's not good. But there's more to the tape. And when you play the whole tape, you can generally, okay, let me come through this. But just like ancient times, it gets stuck. It's not playing all the way. Some people get stuck. Some people let disappointment and discourage them cause them to regress or have behavior that's not necessarily correct. And in short, I've seen people go from the extremity, I'm not wearing a mask, we're partying. I'm not worried about that, to the other extreme, which is depression, hopelessness, all kind of thoughts. And there's nobody there with them to explain there's COVID.
And drawing on your own experience, were there any kind of resources or assistance that you would have liked to have received coming out?
I would have liked to receive, and this is my personal belief, I believe that the state should have, like the chaplaincy in the state of Texas, they have a volunteer force that is phenomenal. I believe that parole should have a volunteer force that deals nothing with the legalities and responsibilities of release. I believe that they should actually have, by volunteer, people who help you fill out digital questionnaires, who help walk you through the different steps. That's what would have helped me. I had that. But from a state sanctioned idea, I really believe, and there are people all over Texas who will volunteer for that, but I actually think that they need to mandate that. And once again, not dealing with any of the security issues, but just recruit and say your sole responsibilities, these parolees, you help them with basic everyday skills that will help them reacclimate themselves. Not the classes, not the fees, not anything like that, just everyday things. I would have liked that. I would have liked someone to answer just some questions. I'm not a needy person, but I don't believe that there's any self-made person. So when I say I need help, I don't need help in the sense that I won't do for myself, but there are just different things that if that was more available, and I understand because of time, but for me personally, there was not enough time spent with me from the individuals who I am responsible to. Meaning, if I don't meet my responsibilities, I go back to prison. Did people sit down and explain to me? Yes, they did. Did people give me things in handwriting, explain to me? Yes, they did. But I still would have liked when I'm going through the process and, oh, there's a hiccup there. Meaning a process will be, okay, I know I have to pay these fees. Here's the money order. I have the money order. What name do I put on it? Okay, I've got to wait till the next time I see the individual because they're busy to ask them, what name do I put on here? Just simple things like that. Just,
Gotcha. So you're speaking maybe to these like pragmatics and just the kind of hand holding of all of the steps. Do you think that there's also, you said, you spoke about the responsibilities of release. Do you think there's also kind of an emotional, spiritual responsibility to the process of release?
I don't think that the state is equipped to do that. I believe that the state is equipped to recruit, not by salary, but by volunteer. I believe the state could do that. Because once again, there are so many organizations, just like the organization you belong to, that will help people, but there is not a system in place. It's like a republic. If I happen to go and meet the right people versus, listen, the same way we meet our parole officers, the same way that we go to different classes, just give us that opportunity. Just say, hey, look, these are volunteers that have let us know that for these specifics, you can call them. That would be great, because a lot of guys who are released have an innate quality to, once you give me a little, I'm going all the way. That's one of the reasons a lot of us ended up incarcerated because we'll get a little of the wrong and go all the way. So imagine just a little more help. But I don't want to put the weight on the state. The state is not equipped for all of these parolees, but the state can make a system that helps alleviate some of the pressure from them. I've personally witnessed state employees that are literally doing their job, but they have so many people to deal with, the job is not being performed as well as it could be merely because of the volume of the individuals. That's why, once again, I advocate for a volunteer force. Nothing to do with the legal, but everything to do with the reintegration and reentry. You have a reentry department that is paid. Let the volunteers volunteer. And that would help so much.
And what could you speak more to this reintegration process as you're experiencing it?
Do I what?
Could you just speak more to this reintegration process as you're calling it, and what that, you've used the word process, and so I was thinking about this.
I'm having fun.
Yeah.
I'm having fun because I like to learn, and so I'm having fun. For me personally, I'm loving it. I don't like not knowing things, and so there's a lot that I don't know that I'm discovering, and that's okay. That's just a personal preference. But first, because I have a relationship with God, I'm comfortable in a lot of situations where maybe some others aren't. Not because of me, but because if you have a relationship with God, I believe that's one thing that he does for you. He'll give you peace. Peace does not mean that things are not going to come in your life, not going to come out of you. But what it means is you can deal with them in a manner that not only gets you by or gets you through, but you can deal with them in a manner that some good is going to come up out of it. So for me, the job situation with my employees, and one thing, my manager, because I work part-time at the ministry and I work part-time at the Dollar Tree at the time. And he was like, say, we need to get some more of you. And I say, you need to get a lot of people who have been incarcerated because we come out with a good work ethic. And once you give us a task to do, we want to get the task done because we want to move on to the next thing. And he said, well, you need to send me some more. I said, well, at $7.35 an hour, a lot of people aren't going to do that. And he's like, well, why do you do it? I said, I took the job because I wanted to demonstrate that I'm responsible. And I wanted to get some experience working. But I interviewed for my Dollar Tree job on a Tuesday. On a Wednesday, I interviewed for a position with Jail to Jobs Ministry, which deals with at-risk youth. I got the job Thursday from Dollar Tree. I got the job or offered the job with the ministry Friday. And one of the things I had told him, I said, listen, I'm just starting off, and one thing that I've learned, that I've been advised, is when you have a job, don't quit. And I said, I have a job. It doesn't make that much money, but he gave me an opportunity. So what I'm asking you, I need 2 months to work this job. And he said, why you need 2 months to work the job? I said, because he took a chance on me. And I said, I believe I can make a difference in that store. And he said, how can you make a difference in that store? Because once again, the qualities, the work ethic that I matured in behind bars, what that looked like is when I found out I was going to work at Dollar Tree, I called some friends in Houston. I said, hey, when you go to Dollar Tree, what impresses you? And they were like, really the clean ones. That causes us to feel more comfortable. And so when I was telling my other friend, the gentleman who was going to hire me for this job, I said, I can make a difference in that store. He said, how do you know? I said, one, my attitude. I control my attitude. One, I'm very passionate about what I want to do. I make people better around me. I don't make them better by doing, but I make them better because when I'm doing what I do, generally the people who are around me doing what they do, God will give me something, some encouragement or some kind of something for them. So I said, let me have that time. And so I did that. I did that, and it was good. And I just gave my 2-week notice 2 weeks ago. And as last Saturday was my final day, now I work full time for the ministry. That, once again, the reintegration. I work at the catering part on Wednesdays and do office work. On Thursdays, I go to a home and we do we print T-shirts and stuff, and we're fixing the home up, so it'll be a group home. But I chose construction in the Texas heat over a strong possibility. I had a great interview at Starbucks, and Starbucks was like, "Hey, we like you. We'll call you Friday." And I chose that because part of my reintegration, just what I told that woman I'm going to do. I could go work at Starbucks. I believe I can make a difference at that Starbucks. But going out on this construction site with these young men who are 17 and 24, who have already been in trouble with the law, what do I think God would use me to do better? Work at Starbucks or work with these young men? And so part of my reintegration, I have never worked with my hands. The first time I used a power tool was a month ago. So I'm using a power tool because I was making boot jacks, because we have different projects where we're taught different skills. And then we have not kids, but young adults with us. And we work on these skills alongside of them and mentor at the same time. And so I've got this power tool. I'm sanding, and different guys I did time with, they're like, "Oh, are you serious?" I said, "Yes." And then my friend, when I told him I'm going to work construction, I said, "Man, it's part of the process." I said, I'm all in with God. And when I say I'm all in with God, my career, my friends, my wife. And so all in looks like, God, if this is in line, I said I want to help people. I don't get to choose who I get to help. This is an opportunity. This is the ministry I belong to. I'm ill-equipped from an experiential standpoint to deal with the tools and the heat and all this other, but I'm well-equipped to deal with the individuals. And my first day was Tuesday, and I went out there, and it's different. But what kept me going, I was able to talk to the guys, and I at the end of the day, I said, "Hey, you guys got any prayer requests?" So one guy, he looked at me and he was like, "What's up with that?" And I said, "What you mean, what's up with that?" I said, "You got any prayer requests? Why would I work with you all day and not ask if you had any prayer requests?" And he was like, "No, nobody came at us like that before." I said, "Bro, if I deal with you, how can I deal with you without asking you? That's just natural to me. That's just natural." See, there's some things that I've learned that's just natural with me. Other things that I'm having to acclimate myself with, like the debit cards, different things like that. It's been a slow process, but the dynamic of that is this: everyday activities. That's taken me longer to learn. Then I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm about to do a YouTube channel. I can cut video, I can edit video, it comes to me. So what that lets me know is there's a process. I'm gonna take these things that are simple, everyday things. For real, the other day, I've been paying cash for gas. And my friend is like, "Say, you're supposed to use the card." I said, "Bro, here's what I don't want to happen." Reintegration, true story. I said, I don't want to put the card in and my bank account is left open because I don't know how to close it because no one's standing there with me at the pump. Somebody would say, "Well, it's common sense, just put it in." It's not common sense to me that when I put this card in here, it's going to explain what to do. And then when I pull it out, my account's going to be closed. And I'm not going to ask a stranger at a gas station, "Come here, can you help me? I've got my bank card. Here I go. I'm going to put it in. You tell me when it's closed." I'm not going to do that. So what I had him do, I was on the phone. I said, "Look, this week I'm going to do it." I said, "That cash at the pump, man." I said, "Ooh, that cash at the pump." Shoot. But so I went and I put it in there. And then it told me, I can read and comprehend. I'm like, "Oh, okay, boom." And it closed out. That has been a part of my process. Another part of the process is really big. A lot of people are not necessarily eating correctly. And when I say that, yes, some people have families, some people have wives, but I'm saying a lot of people that I have dealt with and that I deal with, they don't. And so, they're eating a lot of fast food. They're spending money that they really don't have because if I get it right, like the Uber Eats, because they can't leave, so they got to have somebody bring it with them. And so just things like that. One lady told me, she said, hey, the storm's coming up and you need to make sure you get some more gas because people are coming from Houston and other places. And I said, what you don't understand, I can't go to the gas station again until Monday. I said, I appreciate you. But these are all things that I am reacclimating myself to as far as society. And COVID, once again, it has made it a lot more difficult than it normally would be. But I'm thankful, I'm grateful, and I make the best of what I have.
So related to that, Sean, I think you've said you were incarcerated for 27 years. And so I think it was 1992, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's 2020 now. How do you make sense of the world that you've walked into from a societal perspective, from the youth you run into, from climate?
I love it. I love it because I'm a person who I strive to make a difference. I don't have to be out front to make a difference, but I have to make a difference. If I'm a part of something, I need to see some movement. It doesn't matter who's leading. I need to see some movement. And in this world, with the technology that you have, if you have something to help someone, you not only can disseminate that, but people who need help, they can find you quickly. So I like it. I like it a lot. As far as from a moral standpoint, it has changed drastically from when I left because, I heard about the dressing and the this, that, and the other. But truly, I can say that there have been times since I've been out, I'm like, is that legal? I mean, I'm just being, is that legal? Man, are you serious? And they're like, yeah. And so from that standpoint, I'm like, that's not a good look because people speak about safety and toning stuff down, but there's a lot of disrespect. There's a lot of, I don't want to let you be who you are. I want you to be just like me. And politics, I think that's terrible what's going on because no matter what party it is, the bottom line for government to work, they have to work together. I do not believe that you can legislate morality. And when you speak about things such as racism and other things, there is no amount of laws that can come out that can change a heart. And so this society tries to legislate what I believe can only be resolved from a relational standpoint. That is my personal opinion. The only other thing that comes to mind as far as this society is you can get help if you need it, but you're going to have to be determined to find it during COVID. You can get it, but you cannot haphazardly attempt to get it during COVID.
And since your release, in terms of these current affairs and what the state of the world and also the state of the country is at the moment, of course, there was the murder of George Floyd and a lot of public protests now in light of that around police violence. What has been how have you followed these events? And do you have any thoughts that you could share about that from your vantage?
My thoughts are, I believe that there are a lot of people who, before the events, felt ostracized, felt alienated, had a whole bunch of stuff going on the inside. And I believe that a lot of people have used these tragic events to unleash what they've always wanted to say or do, and this is just an excuse. The problems that exist today will not be handled in courts or courtrooms, but in neighborhood relationships, whatever that looks like to whomever. All of these problems are solved if you have relationships one with another. There is a lack of relationships. And you say, oh, that's a bunch of bull. Go to a neighborhood where the neighbors know each other and talk and see how much crime exists. I don't care what race. Go to law enforcement that they have good relationships with others outside of uniform and see what their record is. And when you try to depend or blame politicians for things that my personal opinion is, churches are designed to solve. And when I say a church, I'm not talking about a building. The definition of a church, I'm a Christian, is a group of called out believers. If the church did what it was supposed to do, a lot of these situations wouldn't be as such. A lot of people, and you ask my opinion, a lot of people want to jump at opportunistic examples, but you don't want to stay for the long haul. It's such as your organization. You could get the best and the brightest offenders, the ones who, oh, he did this heinous crime, oh, he's been locked up that amount of time, but you're not solving the problem. But when you do everyday interviews with everyday people, that's how you cause change. You can't go to one funeral, make a speech, and you think that's going to be changed because there are other funerals that you've never attended that they're going on the whole time. Their mothers are hurt too. But if that is in your DNA as a spiritual man of God, hey, I'm just willing to help. And that's what you're disseminating to the people who have respect for you, not just vain rhetoric, but actually, I'm telling you literally, go on your streets, meet your neighbors, and tell me what it looks like 6 months from now. What are you saying, Oliver? I'm saying to the affluent and to the poverty-stricken, come out of your homes, meet the people around you, and if by some chance they're okay, share a meal. I tell you, in every facet, you will see change. That is my personal opinion.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that you're working with young folks. Doing the math, you were a young man when you were incarcerated. That's correct?
Yes, I became incarcerated at 21. I turned 22 when I was still there, and I'm now 49 and I have a birthday in September.
Oh, there you go. Happy birthday in advance.
Thank you.
Do you have any observations on young people now from what you've seen either from media, online, and then your own current work?
If I'm making a blanket statement, my blanket statement, which does not fit everyone, but a majority, they are very distrustful because a majority of people have made promises that they did not keep, and people who should have been responsible for them have not been. I believe that there's greatness in them, but there has to be a time that elapses where they give you an opportunity because they've been let down so many times. I don't see what a lot of people see. One time I gave an illustration and I said, my generation, and I had on an outfit, I said, my generation, we basically like to look good. We want to look good. We want the things to look good. And so this outfit represents, we were really into the presentation. I said, the generation behind us, and I had a rock. And I said, they're like this rock. They're hard. They're angry. But I said, here's the thing. That rock, when they believe in something, they will not be moved. They will not be dissuaded. They will not quit. And if you can just help them get a hold of the right thing to believe in, they'll make a difference. Because here's the other. How much has rap music influenced the world in the last 10 years? That's rap music. How much have reality shows influenced the world in the last 10 years? Those basically are youngsters, that generation, and they show you that they can bring about a change. And that's what I believe in. I believe that they're valuable, they're great, but I understand the attitude. When I say I understand, the attitude, the wall, the anger. Cool. All I can do is just be present and hope that you, just like that parole officer, see something in me to give me an opportunity. An opportunity that I want is just to share something with you that changed my life. And if you do it, you don't need me, but if you do what I'm telling you, it'll change yours.
And related to your ministry work, do you also work with incarcerated people as well right now?
No, not right. I don't. The ministry does.
Okay.
But because I have my movement is I can't go anywhere. Like, what stops me from doing a lot of things, I have to do my schedule 2 weeks in advance. It was a week, but now they're saying 2 weeks. So I can't go all around this city and help. But the ministry that I work for, that's what they do. That's where the kids come from. It's not like just when I say kid, I mean young adults. It's not just that they're kids or young adults. No, they've been in trouble. This ministry deals with at-risk youth. This ministry deals with children who have been incarcerated. And I'm sorry that I keep calling them children, because I have to wrap my mind around it. Because they're little adults. They're little adults. But I just see them as just younger. My viewpoint is like, you're real young. You really don't know. It's like today, a young lady, we spent about an hour talking. And then she just turned the conversation, and she's just like, some stuff happened to me that really made me like this. And I said, and let me tell you this, I said, that's why you want to come here, because you want to be in an environment, a safe environment where you can be you. I didn't ask you about your history. I didn't ask you about different things you have going on. I'm here for you. Now, what you choose to tell me, what you want to discuss, if that changes me, I'm not who you should have in your life. That's one of the things I just encouraged, my last encouraging word on Facebook. I said, you have a lot of people who have low self-esteem. And there are a lot of people who really don't know what they like. What they dislike about themselves is not really what they dislike about themselves. It's what others dislike about them. And their reality has become their reality. If you're comfortable in your own skin, then things are going to go better. And if you're not, get around some people that can show you, like, say, okay, I know you messed up, but let's go. That's not giving you an excuse to mess up, but that's saying, that's what genuine care. That's what compassion is. That's what, when people are actually trying to help you, they're not trying to help you because you fit a particular mold. They're trying to help you. Genuine help is because I care about you. So when I care about you, I don't have everything together. I don't think you have everything together. And so it might look different, a gang member, a this, a that, you, me, but it's the same thing. We don't have everything together, and we want to be around people who just help me. And when I don't necessarily do it well, you can correct me, but at the same time, don't give up on me.
Gotcha. So one thing too, Sean, is that we do interviews. Our organization does interviews, and part of that, of course, is what we call memory work, which is just the act of going into people's stories. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what story work is to you, or why you share your story and have been so open and generous with it.
Well, I love people. I love people, and I just want to share what has worked for me. And when I say what worked for me, I'm speaking about during my incarceration as well as my release since. And what works for me is following God. What works for me is the precepts of the Bible. But what is in me is I just love people. And what that looked like before, I would always want people to be their best. So I would encourage former girlfriends or whatnot, you want to go to school, you want to do this, you want to do this. Because I thought that's what it was about. I thought it was about career. I thought it was about money. And when I began to do illegal things, I always want to encourage men, get as much as you can, get as much as you can, get as much as you can. When I accepted the Lord Jesus Christ, my personal Lord and Savior, what he did is he put people in place of money and women. And so when I look at people, I want the best for you. I just want the best for you. And I don't know what's best for you. So I just pray and I listen and I interact. And so part of that is I have to be vulnerable. I have to share. Just like I tell you, I play the whole tape. Meaning I can tell you the good stuff, but I can tell you the difficulties too. It's just like a lot of people, they'll ask me, what was the greatest difficulty? And I said, in all honesty, a lot of things that you're trying to speak on me, that hasn't been difficult. But have I had difficulties? Yes, and I've shared some of them with you. But my story, that's who I am. That's where I came from. A lot of people are like, don't tell people you've been incarcerated, Sean. Well, I said, everybody who's not been incarcerated, they want to hear the story. That's one reason I got on Facebook, because people kept telling me, hey, you need to tell your story. You need to tell your story. You need to tell your story. Everybody I respect would tell me, you need to tell your story. Everybody that I mentored, they're like, Oliver, man, when you share what's going on with you, that helps us, man, because you speak in everyday applications. And that's what has got me right where I'm at. It's never been an aspiration. It's never been a dream. It's been, I got on Facebook because I want to help people, and that's a platform to help people. I got on Instagram because that's a platform to help people. I'm doing a YouTube channel because I need more time to tell people about the lessons that I've learned and how the Bible applies to that. So my story is not for myself. The Lord put some on my heart before I left prison. He said, your freedom is not based upon your release. It's based upon my purpose. He didn't speak out the sky. He just spoke in my heart. I heard my voice, but I'm not that smart. My freedom is not based upon my release, but my freedom is based upon his purpose. I got that. I'm living that. I'm going to keep living that, and I'm going to share that. And I'm not just living that in word. And that's a struggle. Come on, I have to listen. I'm 49 years old. I'm planning for a family and all this. But what I'm not doing is I'm not chasing a $20 plus factory job where I'll get the money, but I don't have time for people. See, I have to resolve that in me. I'm not built like that. I'm very responsible, very accountable. I aspire to do great things. But when I'm like $7.35 Dollar Tree, $20-some job, okay, but this is 12 hours. I'm not scared of work, but what about the people? The first 3 weeks I was out, I talked to over 200 people. That's not a boast. That's to say, my 3 weeks, I used my phone. I didn't use my phone. Hey, I'm out. Hey, what? I want to help. And I help so much behind the walls. And that's what I would tell God. It's not a deal. I tell it. I say, help me. Let me go. I'm going to keep going. And it wasn't to prove something to God, but I was like, I'm maxed out. Everything you given me to do. Everywhere I've gone. I'm not boasting, but everywhere I've gone, you blessed me to make a difference. Give me an opportunity to see my next. Give me an opportunity to see what you made me, how it can go bigger than a prison. I'm not talking about bigger like lives, but I'm saying more lives. And when he gave me that, that's how I'm living. A lot of guys, they're like, man, you went out on a date yet? I said, no. They said, what's up with that? So I'm not trying to date. I said, I'm being totally honest. I want my wife. I don't want a girlfriend. And you said, why you that? Because That's not what's going on in me. That's not what's going on in me. What's going on in me, man, I'm focused. I want to make a difference. And God, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting you with the finances. I'm trusting you with the wife. You got it. But I still have to deal with that. I have to wrestle with that because that goes against my common sense. But it doesn't go against my heart. And so I'm following my heart. I'm not talking about an emotion. I'm not talking about a feeling. I'm talking, my will is to do right. And my will doing right is to help people. And so how can I help people? I can share my story and what works for me, whether that's a personal testimony, whether that's a biblical account, or whether that's just experiences right now. I pray that this interview helps somebody. And that was my deciding factor. Whether it helps, I won't be like, that's fine. If it helps you, I'm cool. I'm cool with it.
And you mentioned freedom, Sean. I wondered if you could speak to how you think of freedom now.
Freedom for me is not being consumed with things and people. And my explanation is things would be money. People would be the opposite sex. And not being driven by those to obtain those, I'm happy. I'm happy. When I worked at 735, I gave it my best. I went to work, and I've actually had this conversation with like 2 or 3 of the guys, and I said, man, isn't it good to be in a place where when we see money, we don't see double? When we see the stuff on the TV or when we hear about what's going on, we're not driven to be a part of it. We're not driven that I gotta have that. And that's freedom to me. That's freedom to me.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to share that we kind of didn't cover?
I would just encourage people to get to know the people around you. It appears to me in my limited time of release that whether it's at your job, whether it's at your neighborhood, even if it's in a building called church, people have made verbally getting to know one another something that is the exception rather than the rule. And I personally believe that a life that helps others' lives through relationships will be a fuller life than one that doesn't.
Thank you so much, Sean, for your generosity and for your time. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity. I hope, pray something good comes out of this concerning the ministry and whatever the objective is for the people who God put it on their heart to start this organization. I pray for the organization and the people that I've met from the organization. Has not only been pleasant, but it has been energizing.
Wonderful. Thanks. So today is August 26th,